guys that built a foundation that Hoosier fans have adored and loved for many, many years. So right here we have Mr. Steve Green, Dr. Steve Ahlfeld, or Dr. Steve Green and Dr. Steve Ahlfeld, John Laskowski and John Kamstra. So at this time, Steve, if you just open it up with a couple of comments on your thoughts on today, and we'll just keep moving down the line.
Sure. Thank you very much, JD. Yes, I'll get the elephant out of the room. Yes, we would have won a national championship in '75 if Scott May did not break his arm, okay? Yes, we believe that. We were aiming for UCLA. It was every one of us, you talk about never looking ahead to games, but well into probably the middle of our senior year, we had our eyes on UCLA. That was the bar you had to climb over to be significant in college basketball, we thought. And we used to get late night feeds of UCLA games. We had no ESPN, we had nothing, but Steve and I had an apartment, and we'd have the guys over, and we'd watch this black and white UCLA and just say that those are the guys that we're going to beat for the national championship. And that was what our focus was. And then Scott breaks his arm at Purdue, and we take 20 points out of our lineup, and you spot people about 10 or 15 points because you can't take an All-American out of the lineup, any of these that are playing today. And this isn't excuse making, it's just kind of the reality of it, and we did the best we could. And we made up 18 of the 20 points, but we lost by 2. So, to my friends at Kentucky, Rick, you know how friendly they are.
Well, thanks for being here, everybody. It's a real thrill to get together with these fellow seniors from that 1975 team, and I think that's the thing that I remember. Many things, but just having great teammates. The whole team, that 1975 team, the guys that weren't seniors that continued on and did such a great job. But I especially remember these 4 guys coming in together with Coach Knight as their first recruiting class, and he was a demanding coach, as everyone knows, but very consistent with his demands, and he promised you just a couple things when he was recruiting you, and that was that you would go to class and get your degree, and that you would be part of a winning program that competed for national championships, and it was in that order with the going to class first. And so these guys were all great teammates, and stuck together out there. And I think one of the things, everybody on that team accepted their role, whatever it might be. I know John and I were starters in '73 and '74. Along the way, John had the misfortune of his Achilles tendon injury, which really set him back. But that wasn't particularly our role in '75, but along with everyone else on the team, we were there to do whatever we could to help the team win and achieve that goal of what Steve alluded to, getting through the season undefeated. And so it was a real thrill to be on the first team that was 18-0 in the Big Ten, and no one's done that since except another Indiana team, and so it was a real honor. And like I said, everyone accepted their role. John Laskowski would have been a starter on almost any team in the country. He accepted coming off the bench and anything. And Steve would have probably gotten over 20 shots a game from the field on most teams. He was always trying to get to 20, but again, we had 5 guys, 6 guys that were going to score out there, and so it was just a great thing, and great teammates, and I want to thank all of them, and sure it's a pleasure to be here with these guys representing the senior class of '75.
It was a great time. When we signed on, Knight had just gotten here, and he played at Ohio State in the early '60s. We didn't know his playing career, and he coached at Army, and we didn't know much about that either. But we show up, and you could just tell things were different. He ran, as Steve said, a strict ship. You do what I tell you to do, and we're going to be fine. We didn't realize how big it could get. We were just a bunch of guys running around, but he was the mastermind to figure out, I need this guy to do this guy to do that, and we put these guys all together, we really have something. And as we saw the results, I mean, practice was hard. I remember just trying to get through practice. The games were a day off. It was easy. You only played 20 minutes. But we kept winning and kept winning. And so it paid off. So we kept working harder. And nobody played harder or smarter than we did. And those were the real keys to what happened. And I compare our junior year with this team. You know, we didn't have any seniors our junior year. We did tie Michigan for the Big Ten championship and missed going to the tournament because only the Big Champ went, and Michigan beat us in the playoff. But what that year did was really put together a 2-year span. And we knew everybody was going to be back, and we started with that CCA tournament. We won that, and then just took right off into the next year. So I see this team in the very same way. They don't have any seniors. They've got young guys that play, and they've taken this year. They're way ahead of anybody for next year. They're way ahead because if everybody comes back, plus what they had to add, they're going to be ready to go. But what a great I mean, who was to know 40 years ago that we were creating something as big as it's turned out to be, and to win that 18-0 season and win 3 Big Ten championships, and then have the coaches from then on say these are guys that that got it started, and you can take it from there. I think Steve Green made a great comment the other day. He said this isn't about saying remember the good old days, don't worry about this team. This is about us trying to encourage these guys to experience the stuff we have and see how it's paid off all these 40 years later. So we're going to get a chance to be in the locker room before the game and to get to see these guys and encourage them. And Coach Green does a great job of doing that to say these are the guys ahead of you who built this Indiana tradition. You're the guys that have to continue it on. So we're excited to be here, and I see these guys a lot, but it's special to be to have this day. I want to thank the Varsity Club for putting this together. It's a great honor. Thanks.
It's always good to go last after everybody makes comments about the teams. But what I remember, Steve, about the 75 team and the Kentucky game was that had Steve Ahlfeld and myself got to play at least a minute, I think we would have won that game. I don't think there's any question that the outcome would have been differently. Unfortunately, that didn't happen.
That's it.
But, I want to go back. I agree with everything these guys said. I want to go back to our freshman year, because our freshman year was a 71-72 season, and that was the last year in which freshmen were ineligible to play. So and it was, you talk about a tough year, and John said it was different. Yeah, it was different. The freshmen, I think we had maybe a 12-game schedule. And we started this October 15th is when you start practice. You start preconditioning long before that, and you have 12 games. And back then, there were no limits on how long practices could be, how many practices you could have in a row. You didn't have to have any days off. And I think there was one stretch in which we had about 42 straight days without a game and without a break. 42 straight days. Now, what was good about that, though, was that we became the scout team for the varsity. And we weren't playing for Coach Knight, we were playing for Coach John Hall. So we had the benefit of not being under Coach Knight directly, but we were able to learn by watching him coach that varsity. And that was probably a good thing because it was challenging back then. Now, it was also challenging that they'd call you about 15 minutes before we had to be the scout team, and we had to memorize about 8 plays, which most of us could do. But what was really challenging is when they say, okay, run number 6, run number 3. We learned these plays about 15 minutes before we had to go out and demonstrate them to the varsity. But it was a great experience, and I think that was a great learning experience, and helped us then prepare ourselves for our sophomore through our senior years. And the other thing I think about Indiana basketball, and particularly playing under Coach Knight, it is an experience, and it becomes almost like a fraternity, because unless you go through it, people don't really understand, the demands physically and more so mentally that he puts on you. So you can meet a player from a completely different era and still have a pretty good camaraderie with that player, and I think that's pretty unique. And I think that makes Indiana basketball, and that needs to continue, beyond Coach Knight, but it makes Indiana basketball very, very special.
Okay, open it up for a few questions, Rick.
And Coach Knight has said several times the 75 team is better than the 76 team. Do you guys agree with that?
Publicly? Oh, humbly? Oh, gosh. I'm only going to go by what Quinn and Scott and Coach Knight have said through the years, that their answer would be yes to that, margin of victory, that kind of thing. But, that's a toughie. I talked to Bob Hamill just last week about, the reality of it is that we did not, no matter what. But do we feel a certain bond with the 76 championship? Sure. But it's not the same thing as what we had wanted to accomplish. But I think we were pretty good. Like I told people, gosh, I don't know. I never watched us play,
I did, and we were pretty good. I didn't watch it, we were pretty good.
Hey, Kamstra, by the way, John Kamstra and Steve Ahlfeld and I, first day on campus, we're Knights recruits, right? We go, we say, hey, let's go play some basketball. Let's work out. We're now collegiate athletes, and we go over to Coach Knight, and the three of us sat in front of him and said, hey, Coach, where do we go get our gear so we can, shoot around? We thought we were really impressing him, and he goes, I hope you brought some gear. He said, because you haven't done a whole hell of a lot for this university yet. He said, you don't get any. And we looked at each other like, well, wait a minute, aren't we star players? And no, we're not. So we didn't even get any gear until we earned it.
Rick, I think in answer to your question there, as we were winning those Big Ten championships, he's exactly right. UCLA was there when we were in junior high school. They were winning national championships, and they were still winning when we got to college. And it was this mystique about how are you going to beat UCLA. And that senior year, we didn't quite get there. And then remember the next year they played UCLA in the first game. I believe it was in St. Louis, and they beat them. And so now the Dragon's dead, and they knew they could beat them, and they had the disappointment from the year before to say, nobody's stopping us now. So they got over that hurdle, and mentally they had to be a little tougher because they faced that disappointment the year before, and then they were able to take it all the way. So Coach Knight always said, the mental to the physical is 4-1, and I think mentally that team was a lot tougher from what went through on the 75 team with the injury, and then after that they just took off. It's great to watch them.
Maybe for any of you, who was the toughest player on this team? Mentally, physically, who was the guy that you looked to for the toughest?
I would say Scott May. He was just a bull. 6'7", about 220, and that was a big forward in those days. And I can remember in practice, he just knocked guys over. And it's like, how are we going to stop this guy? He kills us in practice. Well, he did that to the other teams, too, obviously. It was great to have him as a teammate. But I thought Scott was absolutely terrific.
I thought I don't know if the toughest, but the hardest for me to go against in practice was Bobby Wilkerson, because Bobby was 6'7", extremely quick, great jumper, had a wingspan of about a 7-footer, could play any position, and he was very, very difficult to go against day in, day out.
The disadvantage for these guys was they had to play the #1 team every day. Other teams only had to play us twice a year. These guys played us every day. That had to be tough.
And we beat them occasionally. I will say that.
What do you remember as your toughest games in '75? And is there any correlation then between what Kentucky is doing now and the tough games they're running into?
Yeah, I think we had a tough preseason schedule that year, and one of the ones I remember a lot was going to Fog Island Arena out in Kansas. It was about our second or third game of the year. They, as always, had a good squad. Very difficult place to play, as everyone knows. And that was came down. Was it overtime?
It is.
Yeah,
Yep.
we went into overtime, and we ended up pulling it out at the end and things. So that's the one that I really remember just because of the difficulty of playing them in there, and like any team, we were an experienced team, but we were still getting better, and that was early in the season, and I think that was one that really sticks in my mind as one of the toughest of the season. And we did have a very difficult preseason. We went on the road there. We played at Notre Dame, went out to Hawaii, won 3 games in a preseason tournament there. So, we had a difficult preseason schedule. But that's one that sticks in my mind.
I'd say it was the Purdue game. when Scott got hurt, Steve Green had a great second half. To lose a guy like that against our arch rival on the road with everything that's on the line, he wasn't going to come back, and we had to regroup somehow. And I think Steve kind of took it on his shoulders to say, hey, I'll pick up some scoring. And he never was shy to shoot, as he admits. But he had a great second half, as I recall, Steve. Is that right?
Yeah, the math worked out that with Scott out of the picture, there were X number of shots available, so I volunteered happily. And interestingly, another game from that year, it was against Michigan State to go 29-0 here, because we did not play that Michigan State team because they boycotted the first game of the Big Ten. They boycotted, it was Gus Ganakis was the coach, and he made some kind of comment about who was going to guard so-and-so, and they walked out. So we had to wait until they brought in what they called their JV squad, because it was a winter break. So our first game of the Big Ten that year was against this mishmash of players. And of course, I remember thinking, I got to get my shots up early because I'm going to get yanked out of the game soon, and I'll be damned. One of these guys scored their first 2 times they touched it against me, my man, and so I knew that this was going to be an odd thing. I think we won by 50, but then we come down here, we got to go beat them, and now they've got everybody back, and they were very talented. Lindsey Harrison, I don't know who else was on that team, but was really good. But that was a tough night, to tell you the truth, even though we won.
Now, just to give you a different perspective, it's funny what you remember. Steve Ahlfeld mentioned the Kansas game, and it was a close game and overtime. But they had a balcony that you had to walk under to get to the locker room, and this is one of the unique things that I remember. We were walking out underneath that balcony, and they were telling us to go home, pig farmers.
I remember those.
Yeah. And I'm going, you guys are from Kansas, and you're calling us pig farmers?
Yeah. Oh, pig farmers. That's good.
Yeah, true story.
Anything else for these gentlemen? Go ahead, Ken.
You're one of the first groups to play in this building, and you've seen it grow this year. What do you remember about this place when you first got?
Well, I know we were practicing in the old field house
Yeah.
for a certain portion of that. And the first day, the first practice in Assembly Hall, Coach Knight came to me, and I was dressing to go. And this is really exciting for all of us. We're going to actually be in Assembly Hall and practice, so that it was certainly ready for the first game of the season. But Coach Knight pulled me aside and said, "You got to go home because your grandmother died, got killed in a car accident." And I said, "But Coach, I got to play. This is practice. This is the first time in Assembly Hall." And he was very demanding. He said, "You're not going to go. You've got to go home." And he sent me home, to be with family. And then he came down to the service later. But I remember missing out on that excitement of the first time. But that was home. This was home for us, Assembly Hall.
I remember coming down as a recruit, and Assembly Hall was still in the construction process. The base, the floor was intact, and the seating was partially completed. And I still remember the first time coming out on that floor with Coach Knight and my parents, and looking up all the way up into the balcony. And it was really impressive. It's just been that was my first memory of Assembly Hall. And obviously, during the playing days, a lot of great memories with the fan base. It was just very, very, very supportive and very vocal, getting on the other team and encouraging us to play our best. And those are the things I remember, just the initial construction and the great fan support throughout the career.
All right, guys, thank you very much. We enjoyed having you here.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.